This is the fourth site of Badagry Slave Trade Center called the Heritage Museum.
You are welcome to Badagry Heritage Museum.
In this museum, we heard about how the slaves were taken from the West Africa to the West Indies. Also, we were told how they put destinies in their hands and were pleading for freedom. At the museum, we were shown the statues which represent the reactions of the slaves when they were free during the abolition of the slave trade.
You are welcome to Badagry Heritage Museum.
Yeah, thank you.
And the museum is all about slave trade. It's all about Atlantic triangular slave trade.
Mm-hmm.
So slave trade started in the year 1445 by the Portuguese. So in 1445, Europeans came down all the way from Europe down to West Africa. So slaves were taken from West Africa down to West Indies. So at the West Indies, the slaves are forced to work on the plantation.
Okay.
Meanwhile, they have to go through a lot of processing. So the plants are crops like sugarcane, tobacco, cotton, rice, and bananas. What they planted will be harvested and will be taken back to Europe. And then Europe, the crops were turned to finishing goods.
Okay.
So they have to turn sugarcane to sugar, tobacco into cigarettes, cotton to textiles, bananas into whiskey. And they're being returned to Africa in exchange of more slaves. The system is triangular. And because they work in between the Atlantic Ocean, so they come across the Atlantic triangular slave trade.
Okay.
And over there we have a symbol which was used to campaign against slave trade when the slave decide to take destiny into their hands. And here is a man asking, am I not a man and a brother? Because a fellow human being like him reduced him to this level. Okay. So he's asking, is he not a man like the master? Is he not a brother to the master? So why is the master trying to enslave him? So he's begging for freedom from the person that's captured him as a slave.
Okay.
And of course, between 1640 to 1750, the Europeans divided the West African coast into 4 major coasts. So each of the coasts was named after the things they discovered in each country. So the first one is called the Grain Coast, and the Grain Coast is Sierra Leone and Senegal. Okay. And the second one is called the Ivory Coast, that's Côte d'Ivoire.
Côte d'Ivoire, yeah.
The third one is the Gold Coast, Ghana. And the last one is the Slave Coast. Okay. So the Slave Coast is our country, Nigeria, and then Benin Republic. So it's because a lot of slaves were taken from there. That's why they're being referred to as the Slave Coast. Yeah. And also we have the white slaves.
Okay.
Yeah. So here we have the white slaves. So the white slaves indicate that not only the Africans were taken as slaves, so slavery is what they do all over the world.
Okay.
It's a general business. So they also take slaves from as well. Yes, yeah, they also take the whites as slaves.
Okay.
And this is the trade route, the marching of the slave down to the point of no return. So how they take the slaves down to the point of no return, the same way, the same path that the slave take to get to the unknown destination, which is the point of no return. Okay. So let's see the capture part of the museum. Okay. So here we have the weapons used in slave raiding. So these are the weapons, the guns and the swords, so are used to raid, to get slaves. Okay. And of course, we have the chains, the original chains used on the slaves. So we have the neck chains for the male, the neck chains for the females. So, and this is used for the child. And this for the leg of a slave. And this for the leg of 2 different slaves. So they work at the same time. And this is the branding of the slaves. A lady slave being branded before shipping. A lady slave being branded before shipping. That is, they write the name of the slave owner on the body of the slave for them to identify their slaves. Okay. And these are the separation of families. These are the families being separated. So they are sold to different countries. They are not allowed to see themselves to the end of their life. We have an artistic impression that shows the sign of punishment, the sign of torture given to the slaves at the point of no return. So let's see what they use in exchange of slaves. So there is different items in exchange of slaves. So the items are, we have bottles of whiskey. Okay. We have whiskey. So the whiskey was used to exchange slaves. Okay. So one of the whiskey goes for 10 slaves, either 10 women or 2 men. And these are also some of the items used to buy slaves. They use cowries, they use manillas in the olden days to buy slaves. So after buying the slaves, they take the slave to a place called Barakun. So Barakun is like a store. Okay. It's a store where slaves are kept. Pending the time the ship will arrive to the Atlantic Ocean. Then once the ship arrives, they take the slave down to the point of no return. So this is the marching of the slaves to the point of no return. And immediately the slaves get to the point of no return, they are not allowed to come back. So that's why they call the place point of no return. And these are the slave facilitators, the slave dealers. So these are the dealers of the trade. So here we have the man who explored the West African coast in the person of Prince Henry the Navigator. And here we have the first English slave dealer in the person of Captain John Hawkins. And here is a man called Felix de Souza, who dominated slave trade for 30 years in Benin Republic, that is in Wida. And one of them was actually murdered and was buried here in Badagry in the year 1621. Yeah, that was when it was buried. They also advertised the slaves. For them to know that social slave is available, this slave is available, they place them on adverts. They advertise the slaves to be sold and let by public auction, to be sold a cargo of 94 prime healthy negroes. So they're placed on different adverts on the plantation. So for the person I want to buy the slave to know that the slave is available. So for example, now these ones are from Sierra Leone. So if you need a slave from Sierra Leone, you know that, okay, let me go and trade with John, David and John. So they're the one that owns slaves from Sierra Leone. So let's slave drinking pot. So this is where the slave drinks water from. On the plantation, they put water inside the pot for the slaves. And all the slaves surround the pot. They put their mouths or use their hands to scoop water from the pot. So the drinking is survival of the fittest. Because they drink water once in a day. And this is the replica, the prototype of the slave ship. Inside the ship, you have the upper and the lower deck. Upper deck for the masters and the lower deck for the slaves. So this is the loading pattern because the slaves are being arranged at the lower deck, lying down, facing up for 2 to 12 weeks. At the same spot, the slaves urinate and defecate and they died every day. And when the ship becomes too heavy, they throw some of the slaves inside the Atlantic Ocean to make the ship becomes lighter. And this is the cannon gun. Each of these guns was used to exchange 100 slaves. That is, they give the African chiefs this gun, and the chiefs give them 100 slaves in return. So once again, you are welcome to the Heritage Museum. My next name is Undeyin Olamide. So thanks for coming.